I see two after, so why don't we go ahead and get going and welcome folks as they continue to join us. Welcome everyone to the first of a planned series of at least 3 virtual symposia on careers in data science and statistics, co-sponsored by the Nevada chapter of the American Statistical Association and the Department of Mathematics and Statistics of the University of Nevada, Reno. My name is Christopher Tong. I'm president of the NVASA, and joining me as Zoom host and co-moderator is Professor Mihai An. And we welcome you today and thank Professor T.Y. Tam, who proposed this series back in October. And thanks to both organizations for co-sponsoring this series. Today's presentation is going to be recorded, so I hope that doesn't inhibit anyone from asking a question. If you don't want to be in the recording, you can always leave a question in the chat and Professor An or I will ask it on your behalf. Our speaker has a few natural stopping points in her presentation where we can pause and take questions, and there'll be hopefully a discussion at the end. And so that's just some logistics. I think what I want to do is give a very, very short introduction to our speaker. Dr. Julia Anderson is an alumna of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas Epidemiology and Biostatistics Department, and currently a senior business analytics advisor at Cigna. And she'd like to share her thoughts about data analytics in healthcare. So Julia, it's all yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if it'll, all right, we're in business here. Thank you for having me. I always really like being able to talk to other people in different industries and kind of get a feel for what everyone else does, right? That makes our lives easier if we can collaborate across different, you know, between banks or healthcare or whatever it is. It's always good to have kind of this collaborative effort. And so thank you for the wonderful introduction. I have all of my affiliations there at the bottom, and I've got kind of a structure that I'm going to go through. And there's a reason I set it up this way, and it's because I've heard that this association is kind of a culmination of some high school students, undergrads, grad students, and professionals. And so what I wanted to do was kind of capture all of that into one presentation. And in the future, if you're interested in going more in depth in one topic or another, I'm happy to come back and discuss that further, or one-on-one if that's what you're interested in. And so I'm going to go through my background just to show you that you don't need a data science background to get into the work that I do. I'm also going to kind of go into health insurance and what I do on a day-to-day basis and why I really like this profession. And going into it, I didn't really think I would like it. And coming now after working there for 1.5 years, I love it. And so hopefully I'm able to convey that in my presentation. And then kind of part 2 of my presentation is looking for jobs. So if you're interested in pursuing jobs in analytics, I've put together some kind of tips and tricks that I learned because it took me quite a while to find a job after I graduated with my PhD from UNLV. And it was kind of a mishmash of a bunch of different learning experiences. And so that's kind of how I want to end. And, at the end of this, if you want to trade contact information, and I can, I'm happy to help out with some resumes if you need to, or at least guide you in the right direction. We can do that as well. But let me get into my background, and then I'll kind of stop here and there for questions. Or I don't remember if Zoom has a hand raise function. If not, feel free to interrupt me. I'm pretty chill, but I talk fast. So.
Julia, there was a request to do full screen on your slides.
Well, I'm not full screen, but I can be in presenter mode. Is that better?
I think so, yeah.
I'm getting a yes. Perfect. Okay. So my background is actually in molecular biology and DNA fingerprinting. So I started my whole career at NAU back in Flagstaff, Arizona. working on microbial genetics and genomics. So I've worked with Bacillus anthracis, bubonic plague, any select agent you can think of, I got to do DNA work on, which was a phenomenal start to my career. And I can remember the day that I decided I wanted to go into epidemiology, and it was when the Arizona State epidemiologist, Dave Engelthaler, came and gave a talk, and he was telling us all about the rickettsia outbreak on the Navajo reservation. And I just thought, this is the coolest work. That's what I want to do. So I graduated with my BS in medical microbiology and went on to work at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. Long name. Long story short, my husband is in the military, so we've bounced around a lot, but that works out great if you are in research, especially any kind of clinical research, because you can go from one place to another and you can get tons of different experiences. So moved to Little Rock in 2012, and I got to work at one of the largest lymphoma centers in the world. Now, knowing that I wanted to do epidemiology and work in the clinical world, I was able to do a whole host of tests and develop different genetic testing for cancer, which was very rewarding. We got to help the patients directly. It was fantastic. And so these little grayed out sections are kind of the building blocks of my career. So I started with molecular epidemiology, went into kind of population health, and I just have to point out, UAMS was really fun to work at, but it has the most ridiculous mascot, and that's Reddy the red blood cell down there in the left corner. I have to throw her on there because it's just funny. You just have to appreciate it. So while working at UAMS, I got my master's in public health online at Grand Canyon University. And here I actually was able to use the claims data from UAMS to track different seasonal trending of viral agents. So we looked at just different viruses that are hanging out in the ecosystem year round, see which populations they affected, what time of year they were most prevalent. Like rhinovirus was just insane in November, but then completely gone the rest of the year. So that's kind of how I was able to combine my molecular biology, population health, and claims data, which then brings me to UNLV. My husband's job moved us here. And so I was lucky enough to go to UNLV for my epi and biostats degree. And so the project that I got to work on under Dr. Shanice Mooney was factors associated with the rare disease eosinophilic esophagitis. And so this disease was really cool. It totally satisfied all of my wants and needs for gross diseases that were kind of rare. I got to work with claims data, and then on top of that, statistics. And that was really kind of the linchpin for the rest of my career. Once I found statistics and realized how much I enjoyed the rules and kind of the methodology around statistics, that was it. That was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so while pursuing my PhD, I got my certification for R. And so graduated and spent forever looking for a job. We'll get to that. Don't panic, but I do have some tips that'll hopefully help other people. I applied for several different positions and got a call for Cigna from a recruiter. Now, when people think about health insurance, you think, oh, I pay them money and they don't really do anything for me. Fair. It was not something I expected to go into, not something I really wanted to go into in the beginning. But the person that interviewed me sold me. We get to do really unique things with healthcare data that other people don't get to do. And so that's finding something new and different in different populations. We also get to help address different customer needs that are otherwise completely unmet or unaddressed, because we see all these claims data, whether or not these patients engage with us, because we're the claims come through us first. And so whether or not somebody's ever talked to us before, we know what their health history is. We know how serious it can be. And that's really what kind of grabbed me with all of this was, these people are sick. Why aren't they getting the help they need? And so I started this position in December 2019, and I get to use a combination of epidemiology, population health, claims data, and statistics. I put the job description down there because it's pretty vague, but this is what you'll see on most job descriptions for stats, especially in the public health arena. And so I just kind of wanted you to be able to refer to this if you needed to. Now, that was a whole lot of background. Before I go into my day-to-day, are there any questions so far? Mainly because I need to take a drink of water.
There was a question about where you got the data scientist certification.
Great. All right, let's wow you with some health insurance misnomers. We're going to start here and then I'll get into the more fun stuff. So a lot of people have misconceptions about health insurance, myself included. And that was why I wanted to put this slide in here, because I had a really, for lack of better words, skeezy feeling about going into health insurance, right? I think that's probably a very natural feeling. And so I wanted to get some of these on the slide. I even ran these by my manager just to make sure that I wasn't lying to anybody. And just to kind of understand what I do and why I love it so much, I wanted to kind of touch on some of the biggest misnomers about health insurance. So one, how do premiums work? Your premiums go based up, false. It's not true that your premiums go up based on your health. I hear that all the time, especially from our customers, where it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to go seek therapy because if I have depression, you're going to up my rates. Not true, not how that works. It's typically based off of predictive models that look at location. And if you live in a high socioeconomic area versus a low socioeconomic area, age, tobacco use, plan category based on, what your company chooses to go with, and whether or not your plan covers dependents. And so your health, medical history, and gender cannot affect your premium. And so that's something I really like telling people because I didn't know that when I started. And one of the reasons that I think it's very important that people know so that they can outreach and get the help that they need without fear of, being charged extra. So then that takes me to networks. So you hear all the time that, oh, my insurance company makes me want to go in network. Yes, there is a reason for that. And that's because we vet doctors very, very carefully. I just got done with a study looking at out-of-network spend, and we were able to find one doctor up in New York who was referring to his really good friend who was out of network for Cigna. And what happened was these customers ended up paying $200,000 or $300,000 in surgery costs because this guy wasn't in network. He had very poor patient recovery rates. So these people go to out of network, it's billed to us, and we can see that they went out of network. But then we can also see that their knee blew out again after the surgery 4 or 5 months later. And so we very, very carefully vet these physicians that fall under our brand. And that's not because we don't like them. It's because we want our customers getting the best care. And that's what we push. And we have incentive programs for physicians who are really, really good at what they do. They get great kickbacks for, treating the patient really, really well. And we take that incredibly seriously. And then without getting into the socialist aspect or, what our country should have or any of that, we're stuck with what we have. And so I come to my job every day knowing what the structure of our health insurance is, albeit frustrating. But I want to do the best job that I can for my customers to make sure that they're getting the care that they need. And that's based off of, it is expensive, but you have to remember too, there are analysts and physicians, nurses, pharmacists. There are thousands of people in the background developing these predictive models and looking at the different customer populations to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to help people with their health. And that's what I love about my job is I get to look at these populations and really dissect them and do whatever I can to help these customers. So that is why I love working in this industry. And so before I move on, any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. It says like the premium is affected by the location, age, and tobacco use. So how do you collect the data on tobacco use of the the client?
Great question. That's something, so when you go to sign up for insurance, that's one of the questions is, are you a tobacco user? And we actually, yeah, and that metric is really, really great for us because we use that in our lung cancer predictive models. To then be able to target these customers and say, you've been a smoker, you've been with us for 15 years, you say that you've smoked for 16 years, what can we do to help you quit to avoid lung cancer or, esophageal cancer, whatever it is?
Okay. And why does location affect the premium?
Great question. It really depends on I don't want to say population, but it depends on the structure of that economy. And we'll kind of get into that towards the end, but we really focus on social determinants of health. And so someone who lives in New York, for example, it's a much, much more expensive place to live than, say, Memphis. And so the premiums are higher because the doctors need more money to charge patients to survive.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, wonderful question. Great question.
Hey, Julia, quick question. So you said something about the socioeconomic status being related to premiums. Is that the way? So if somebody comes from and so that's also correlated with the location typically, does that work out intuitively how we want it to work out, or does it work out in the opposite way, how business wants it to work out?
Fantastic question, Shar. And I'm glad you brought that up because that's, we help these customers, but we have one hand tied behind our backs. We know that someplace like Memphis, anybody who's done any kind of epidemiological study on Memphis knows that it's a very, very overweight population, very, very sick, largely African-American with a high distrust in the medical system. And so doctors don't want to go there. And so the doctors that are there are the ones that we have to rely on to help these customers. And it's, this is why I'm in this field, because they are not able to provide the amount of care to these patients because it's too expensive for the patients. So what we do is, and you'll see on my next slide, we are changing that at Cigna. And that is why, this healthcare system is not great, but it's what we have. And so this is why I'm happy to be in this field to start changing it. Is that a good enough answer, Shar?
Yeah, I can infer the rest. Thank you. But I'm looking forward to the next slide, though.
Great question.
Thanks.
All right. So something I wanted to touch on was that health insurance, which was at the bottom, but I got distracted by great questions. Health insurance companies don't make money off of claims. So that's something you should understand before we go to the next slide. Health insurance companies make money off of products. And so we sell different products based on, we'll use the Memphis example because that's one of my markets. So Memphis, we know high obesity, high diabetes. So what we do is we try and get these customers engaged into programs that their employer is already paying for. And if that employer is paying for the program and the employee benefits, why aren't these employees engaging with us? Which we'll get to in a minute. But that's mainly what we work on, are products that help these customers get to where they need to be and, just make their overall lives better. So the product that I work on is called CHAM, the Custom High Acuity Model. And so this model is actually really interesting and really fun because health insurance as a whole typically looks at the whole book of business. So all of the clients put together, you do big predictive models to look at everyone. Well, if one of my clients is JP Morgan and the other one is FedEx, they're going to have vastly different populations. You have one that are, they're bankers, they sit at desks most of the day, don't really interact with people. You have another one that's largely transit. They're driving across the United States. They have vastly different needs. And that's what we're working towards, which I really like. And Shara, your question was a great lead into this. And so currently we have 5 clients that are under this product. It's just under 630,000 customers. And so we're looking at about 13 million claims a year from these customers, varying from nothing at all because they're younger, have never been to the doctor before, insanely expensive, $2 or $3 a year. And this is where my job gets really fun. So I get to work with one other analyst. We're trying to upscale and bring out this product. So small venture at the moment, but we have 4 medical directors. So each client is their own medical director almost. We have one that's smaller, so it gets divided. We have 4 project managers, 65 case managers. So these case managers are trained nurses. So if anybody from any of these 5 clients come to Cigna, direct to a nurse, and they can work out whatever they're having, billing or their health, or they just have questions about the patient. All that is supported by the product. We also have 5. Oh, it says my internet connection is unstable, but I think I'm just going to press. Somebody text me if I drop. We have 5 pharmacists and 20 behavioralists. And so really what the special sauce of our product is we're looking at the whole person. So we're not just looking at, what company they work for. We want to see if they have behavioral claims of any kind, whether it's outpatient, inpatient, are they going in or out of network? How can we help them get the behavioral help that they need? Especially now with COVID, the depression claims have shot through the roof. Same with anxiety, which makes sense. I mean, global pandemic. But it's great trying to figure out different ways to approach these people. So let me back up for just a second. Where we start is high level. So we look at the client, we look at their employees, and we try and find some kind of opportunity. Who are the customers that need our help the most? Where do they live? Do they have a doctor that they're seeing regularly? Who isn't being outreached? Who has Cigna not called in 5 years and why? And so what I do is I put together this high-level population analysis and really try and figure out where these gaps are and who we're not helping. And what I do is I take that to our medical directors and project managers. And what we do is we try and figure out the clinical relevancy of what we're looking at, as well as try and develop an intervention. So one of the ones we're working on right now is in Memphis, because FedEx is one of my clients. And what we've seen is typically these employees are month-to-month bill payers who can't afford to go to a therapist. And so it's like, well, what do we do with this? So what we've started doing is sending out prepaid cards to these people to be able to extend their cell phone life and not worry about data overages. And they can call in to a behavioralist and get the help that they need. And we've got it very targeted to different people who have, 2 or 3 kids or have 2 or 3 jobs. And those are the people we're focusing on helping to see. It doesn't even need to move the needle, as it were. We just want to help people. And if this is a way we can get there, then it's a great test and learn interface to do that. So then what we do is we kind of run this for 2 or 3 months, whatever intervention we choose. And we look at the back end and see what impact we made. So another example is I'll go with the cardiometabolic high acuity group that I have down there because that one's really fun. So this time last year, we found a group of customers who had never outreached by insurance before that had cardiovascular disease, congestive heart failure, diabetes, obesity, or really high inpatient or ER rates. And what we did is we kind of put together a story of why these people had never been outreached before, what the issues were, where they were located, and basically just called them and asked what we could do to help. And we actually got about 20% of the population who come back and say, I can't believe you called. Thank you for calling. I don't know what to do. I work, 3 jobs. I can't get the diabetes medication I need. And so for several of them, we were able to set up our at-home pharmacy and just get it shipped directly to their house. And they were just thankful to be able to talk to somebody who knew or understood what was going on. And so that was a really fun project. And I just finished doing a paired t-test to look at their pre versus post spend, especially with COVID going on and everything. So we outreached these people last year. Claims typically have a delay of about 3 months. And so I had about half the population that we had identified. We had enough claims run out to be able to look at. And it was really cool to see the inpatient and inpatient and ER spend pre and post versus the engaged customers and not engaged customers. Engagement was actually significant. And so that's really cool. That means that what we're doing is actually making a difference. I can't put any of that on here because it's kind of more proprietary, but I told you the story and it's recorded, so you can go back and listen to it, fall asleep to it. It's wonderful. And so that falls under our remeasurement, right? So it worked. So how do we move forward with this? Do we want to upscale this to other things? That's something we're working on now and kind of expand. Any questions? Again, I'm sorry, I talk really fast, so.
Julia, a kind of side question. Does companies like Cigna do research not only for their own business, but also for academic publication? Or
Yes.
would they lose a competitive advantage if they did that?
No, we do publish white papers. That is something that we actually just signed on with Evernorth. And so we are now legally allowed to share information back and forth between us and Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is wonderful. Like the more people we can reach, the better. Great question.
I got another one also. So it seems to me the way you're presenting the analytic approach is that you're still appealing to obviously like the biggest problems within the different subpopulations. Is there, with the advent of like personalized medicine and, at least semi-personalized interventions that's picking up these days, is there a notion of like tailoring paths? So, maybe it's just 2 products that serve a market, or maybe it's just 1 product with like different paths or something like that. Is that also, or does that rollout of like 2 policies that should have really been 1 product or something like just become a massive hassle? Because this can't cover everybody, right? Because I'm sure there's like people in Memphis that don't have that problem.
Sure, well, it depends on who. I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, they're correct. Yes, there are people in Memphis who are not having this problem. What we see though is that, and what's very interesting across these clients. So when I started this intro, I said, oh, you have JPMC and you have FedEx, they're different. They're actually not as different as you think they are. Every client has the same systemic problems that we see in the United States. And this year, we are revamping to try new and different things because, everybody knows that obesity and, diabetes are a problem in the US. That's universal. And so what are we doing different this year that's going to change? Not just that, but, address some of these other needs. And, some of the projects we're working on, one of my clients is interested in their COVID long haulers, where you have these patients who have had COVID for a year now, or, they're still feeling the effects of COVID. We have another client that's interested in digital solutions. So they don't want their employees having to go to the doctor or a therapist. They want all of these digital solutions set out for them. And what can we do to make that happen? And so it's interesting because a lot of clients are very similar, and finding these niche differences is more complicated, but I think it's really fun, honestly.
Makes sense. Thanks.
And so this might kind of expand on that. I should be paying you for these transitions. We have a lot of predictive modeling, and the three that I really wanted to touch on were our heart conditions. So we have one model that actually looks at episode treatment groups, claims codes, service codes, what the actual price was. So we can determine down to the claim code or the price what service a customer got. And with that, we were able to come up with and develop a predictive model that can estimate whether someone is going to have a heart attack in the next 0 to 90 days, 90 to 270 days, or 270 to 360 days out. And what's really wonderful about that is these customers who are at risk of having a heart attack in the next 0 to 90 days, we can intervene with. And if we can't get in touch with them, we can get in touch with their PCP and say, look, we've seen this claims trend. They've been going to the urgent care clinic without you knowing. They've been to the ER without you knowing. We see these trends. You need to intervene with this customer now. You need to get in touch with them and tell them that they are at risk. And so having this ability, I think so often in healthcare in the US, we're reactive in just paying for the costs, right? So obesity, diabetes, you lose a limb because of diabetes, or, musculoskeletal, you end up having, serious hip or knee issues because your body can't carry your weight. That's very common in our country. And we're very used to just paying for those claims as a reactive measure. But so rarely do we think about the proactive measures that we can take. And that's really what we're focused on. Especially moving forward. We also have a high cost claimant model. So we can look and see a patient's whole history. So we look back 10 years if we have that much data on a patient. And we can see that, they were fine up until this claim code. And then we see that they all of a sudden have a claim code that predicts renal failure. And if we know that's coming, we can intervene with them and get them, aligned with a doctor who has a really good reputation for really, really good patient outcomes. And then from there, avoid them becoming high cost. And that's really the meat of what we're trying to do here. And then musculoskeletal. This one's always interesting to talk about. And it's kind of personal to me because my mom had a degenerative spinal disorder. And so she's had 7 discs fused, which, if you know how many bones are in the spine, that's a lot. And so what we're learning is that cutters are going to cut because it's easy. Patients are going to go through surgery because it's easier than going through cognitive behavioral therapy or physical therapy to learn about why they're in pain and how to get them out of that. And so, unfortunately, so often it's difficult to, move someone from wanting that quick access to just going under the knife and having it done. And I've got a physical therapist friend that I talk to all the time about this because it just infuriates me. And it's tough. And that's something we're focused on this year, is getting people out of the ER or out of these surgeons, wing, I don't know what to call it. And, helping them with that as opposed to, I'm going to stop there. Sorry. Kind of a bit of a tangent. Any questions? So this is really what are the meat of our products are. And I can't give you any more specifics than that just because it's proprietary.
I'll just interrupt for a second. If some folks are experiencing some bandwidth issues, so if audience members could turn their cameras off for the moment, that might help. Thank you.
Thank you for the heads up, Chris. Yeah, I see some people frozen over here. Actually, I could. We'll try that too.
Yeah, let's try that. Thank you.
Any questions about our predictive models or maybe what we're working on? I'm happy to answer the best I can without giving away our top secrets.
What are you guys using for your predictive model in terms of like statistics?
In terms of what? I'm sorry.
Statistics?
Oh, yeah, great question. It really depends. And I'll talk about that now. Something you will notice, well, okay, hold on, let me back up. I didn't actually develop these predictive models, so I can't tell you. But what I can tell you is that it's a mix of what people feel like the model should be. And I say that kind of with hesitancy because I know it sounds bad where it's like we're just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. I just personally, I'm on a group of, my product rolls up into a group of 60 other analysts, and we kind of work together to figure out the best predictive models for what we're looking at. And so, each one is different and unique. And that's, we have a different analyst working on the heart conditions model versus the high cost claimant model. And, it's really up to their expertise to pick what they want to use. Same with the, and we can talk about this more, but same with the platform, right?
How do you pick your analyst?
Say again?
How do you guys usually pick your analyst?
Interviewed, we like really motivated people. And so really the way Cigna kind of works with their analysts is you are thrown into a group, you're given a bunch of data, and it's, do some research on what this looks like in the US, what the past looks like, adjust for what you think is correct, and then kind of go for it. So I hate to say this, but it's really a test and learn. We all work together to really make these models as best as we can based on the information we have. Mm-hmm. And so I'll give you an example. So one of my coworkers was the one who developed the heart conditions model. Super cool. There were a couple of issues with it, with covariates that I didn't think should be in there. And so we worked it out and it was great. Total teamwork, win. And then so what we were able to do was use this for our CHAM populations and identify customers. Well, it didn't work as great as it should have. We refer to it as the bicycle model. And so now we're working on the Honda model, where hopefully the Honda model will be a little bit better than the bicycle model. And then eventually we want to have the Tesla model, where it is the primo heart condition model. So that's kind of the different stage development for the modeling that we do. And I wish I could give you more information on it. I just did not develop.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah,
so,
that's cool. Thank you.
But yeah, absolutely. It's fun to look at because when you look at these different populations, you can definitely peg where the food deserts are. And
it's pretty competitive to become an analyst, right? Because you guys only have 2.
No, well, so Cigna's full. For my product, we have 2. On my global data and analytics team, we have about 60.
Oh, okay.
And Cigna is always hiring. So we'll get into that in a second because I definitely have some tips and tricks for if you're looking for a job in this industry.
Yeah.
little interested?
Yeah.
Perfect. I think I have, there we go. So the last thing I just wanted to touch on real quick was how we're unique. And so really what we are focusing on is the whole person, whole health. And so we're not just looking at what your claims look like or what the service codes look like. We're looking at where you live. This is the Social Determinants of Health Index. We use this all the time. What it is it's census tract based. And so we can see, these are all weighted differently in the models that we use. But what happens is we can see that somewhere with low access to food and poor healthcare system access and, poor neighborhood and physical environment, we know that these, certain factors are going to increase our obesity and diabetes customers. we just see more in those areas. And so, this is something that we're really focusing on. We're also really interested in behavioral and medical integration. So at a lot of insurance companies, what happened was you weren't allowed to cross-talk between medical and behavioral. And that's just because behavioral can be a very sensitive subject. You don't, if your doctor came to you and said, hey, your insurance company called me and said that you went somewhere else and, you're going to therapy. Obviously, that's a really, really fine line to toe. And so with the product that I'm working on, we're trying to merge those as best we can. At this point, with some of the different studies that we've done over the last year, we know that someone with a behavioral condition, which could be either, not COPD, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, we know that increases their actual spend on medical health by about 6 times, which is huge. And so obviously the behavioral factor is the underlying issue there. And so that's something that we're really, really interested in. And we also have lots of case managers. We want these people to be able to get the help that they need when they need it. And so, that's something that we really tout is that, if you need help, you need to call in. You need to engage with us. As much as I hate saying it, everyone hates calling their insurance company. We did it earlier today for our homeowners insurance. It's a pain in the butt. It takes forever, but call your insurance company and figure out what coverage you have. You may have really awesome benefits that you didn't know about. And so, we use a variety of ways to try and engage customers, case managers being one of them. And so I'm going to stop there before getting into part 2 of my presentation. Any questions, anything I should revisit? Fabulous. You guys are great. And I'm very proud of my dog. He hasn't barked once during this whole presentation. That's just amazing for him.
I have a quick question. I think there was a question in the chat previously about where you got the data scientist certification from.
Oh, say that one more time.
I think someone asked a question about where you had your certification from, the data scientist certification.
Oh, I will get into that, but I got it from DataCamp because it was cheap and easy. I mean, it was a wonderful program. Okay, so yes, of course. Hopefully this part 2, which Shari, you've seen this before. This is pretty much, this is close to the talk I gave before with some updates because I have a job now. But something I really like to touch on is applying for jobs because it's daunting. It's kind of crazy. And it really gave me, I don't know, it was kind of a reality shock. So I pulled these from Reddit. Anybody Reddit? So these are some of the quotes that I'd seen. It's been a year and a half and over 300 job applications. I still can't land a job. What am I doing wrong? Job hunting is dehumanizing. Is it normal to apply for 20 plus jobs and not hear anything back? Yes, it is normal. And I'll tell you why, because I did not know this when I started applying for jobs. So this was my experience. I had over 60 applications and I had 3 interviews. Ghosted by 20, never even heard back, rejected by 10. But I mean, you can see the response rate is just, it's low. It's very low. But why is that? A lot of this rejection and ghosting was test and learn. What a certain company wants to see, everything like that. And so the biggest tips that I can give you applying for jobs in anything data science is AI is your enemy. As much as we love it, as much as we depend on it for, predictive analytics and everything, your resume rarely makes it to a real person. And there are several reasons for that, because AI on their end makes it much easier to sift through these different resumes and just pick out the keywords. So the one thing I learned was avoid any kind of table formatting on your resume because AI can't read that. It'll just see this blank. Do not send a CV if the company asks for a resume. And this is kind of my little litmus test here. If you have less than 10 years of experience in a field, or a bachelor's or master's, you want it to be less than 1 page. If you have more than 10 years of experience or PhD, you can have less than 2 pages. But always double check what the company is asking for. When applying for a job, what you want to do on your resume is you want to, which I didn't know this, you want to tailor it to every job that you apply for. So some people call it data science. Some people call it business analytics. Some other people call it predictive analytics. It's all over the place. And what that AI is going to do is it's going to look for those words. And that was where I really messed up. Was I had a really solid resume and I just, submitted it to every company until I started using the same wording on my resume that are in the job description, that was in the job description. I didn't get any replies. And so what I did was I came up with a master resume and a master cover letter and just tweaked that for every job I applied for. And this worked for those 3 that I got interviews for. And then you just want to make sure you always include a custom cover letter that includes the relevant skills that line up with the job description, the job title, and then the company name. Any questions about this?
I have a question.
Yes.
If we are like students, for example, and we don't have an experience in data science or data analytics or whatever, like how do I include the job descriptions?
That's a wonderful question. Yes. So what I started doing, and what I think people forget a lot of times, is that your school projects do count as experience. And so I actually had a recruiter tell me that one time that, if you worked on a solid project, that's the thing, you're still doing the work. And so do not be afraid to put your schoolwork on your resume, especially if you're a student, right? Like you always have these end-term projects. Put those on there. Those all count.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Another thing, I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it like, do you put your classes, let's say, I don't know, mathematical statistics, things like that?
You can. Yeah, if you're trying to buffer it a little bit. So I would count your school experience in your experience, because to me, that's some of the most, like, you're learning through that whole time. So if you need to buffer it a little bit with, recent courses taken, that's something that anybody would look for if you had just applied for a certificate, right? Like if you took a SAS course, you'd put that on your resume. So I don't see why you wouldn't be able to put your school classes on there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Question?
Hello.
Yes, hello. GPA, do you have an opinion on including versus not including?
Nobody cares.
GPA? Nobody cares?
No, I'm going to be straight up with you. I've never even had anybody ask me what school I graduated from, ever. No, really, the questions that they're going to ask you are going to be more relevant to what you'll be doing. So questions that you will get in an interview are, I hand you this data set, what do you do? And you just need to talk them through what you would do with that data set. So you want to graph it. You want to know what kind of variables you're working with. You then want to know what the question is. Are we trying to figure out if A is impacting B? Are we just trying to get some high level, information? Do we just need some basic statistics? So those are the questions you're going to be asked during these interviews. Are, if I give you this data set, what is your step 1? What is your step 2? How do you clean the data? And so it's all going to be very targeted at what you've done in your classes most of the time, what your instructors work you through. So that's kind of my biggest interview tip, is be ready for them to ask you just what kind of model you would run. And you can go back and say, well, I'd like to look at, rules for, this predictive model to make sure that I'm following within the assumptions.
So that makes sense for the interview, but what about the AI? Like just getting before getting an interview, like just getting selected, filtered through the AI.
That on your resume, So I never included GPA on anything. I really, with the AI, the best way to get around that is using the wording and skills that they describe in the job description.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Alejandra, do you have a question?
Well, everybody's talking like about how to present your knowledge, your schooling, and so forth. And it used to be like employers were not very acceptable of people that study online. And now, for example, in a lot of universities, you have no choice but to take courses online or on a hybrid basis. Do you believe that what is going on with the pandemic and people working from home and taking classes online is going to change how employers perceive online education?
That's a great question. I think it depends on the employer. So Cigna, for example, most of my team has worked from home. They've been work from home since 2010. I think is when my boss started work from home. And so this was very normal to them. Other companies like, I'm trying to think, my friend works for the NIH. That was very difficult for them to go work from home. But I don't think online versus in-person schooling will make a difference. It's honestly, what it comes down to for most companies is how motivated you are to learn what you need to learn. And it's very hard to motivate someone to do something, but if you come to the table motivated, they're gonna want you. Great question.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I have a question. And what do you mean they're gonna watch you?
Sorry, say again.
And what was your last sentence about? They're gonna watch you.
If you are a motivated person, so the age-old quote, right, is like, how do you motivate somebody? Well, it's really hard to motivate somebody. I mean, if the person just doesn't like what they do, or what if they don't like the population they're working with or whatever, you can't motivate someone to do something. The person has to come to the table motivated. And so if you are interested in this topic and you're interested in statistics, that's going to reflect on your resume. They're going to see the classes that you've taken or the certificates that you've gotten or the projects you've worked on. And so really, I mean, Cigna especially, I've noticed it as a trend because I've been there for a year and a half now almost. We hire people who really want to dig into the data and who are just interested in doing this kind of work. Does that make sense?
So it is going to show on their resume this interest. Well, it's interesting. But I thought that resume is quite dry and formal. Doesn't really have any place for any interests.
All right, so, well, if resumes aren't your thing, then let me blow your mind. We're going to skip this one because this one is not going to blow your mind. But these are some tips and tricks that you guys can use. I'm not going to read through this, but just for the sake of time. Okay, this is the new thing. LinkedIn, I'm not even kidding you. I got more recruiter calls from LinkedIn than any other platform. This is how I got my Cigna job, was on LinkedIn. And so, I hate social media. I'm not a fan. And so getting my LinkedIn up and running was not my favorite thing to do. However, if you just sign up for the free, I think you get it for 6 months, the free gold account, just remember to cancel your subscription. What you can do is you can actually go in and adjust your skills. And what they show you is the other recruiters who have posted jobs, it'll show you what skills they're looking for. And so you can go in and add those skills to your profile based on whatever stupid naming they use, whether it's predictive analytics, business analytics, whatever. Add those to your profile if you have that experience, and then you will show up on that recruiter's list. And I've added, this is mine down here. Please feel free to contact me if you have questions, especially about LinkedIn. I've used it forever. Or if you have questions about, more in-depth conversations, whatever, please feel free to ping me via LinkedIn or, kind of take some of the information that I have on there, because this is what got me my job. And I want to help others do the same.
Thank you. That's interesting.
I think, oh, and just, I know we have 3 minutes left, and I'd like to leave just a couple minutes for questions. These are questions that impressed the person that I interviewed with. Not to say that these are the best questions to go with or not. These are just suggestions, especially things like, what's the most challenging aspect of this job? If you're never going to get funding, if you're going to have to fight for that every single year to keep your job, that might be really stressful. And so, you know, some things you want to consider. What can you start doing now? These are my biggest recommendations. So with Cigna especially, we are moving away from SAS and SPSS because they're expensive and not as many people know them as they used to. Python and R are really where I see data analytics going, especially, gosh, Python has just blown up in the last couple of years. I learned R because it had more packages than Python at the time. DataCamp is where I learned R, and it was a fantastic program for, like, I think I did 4 months of it and completed my certificate, but they have tons of different projects you can do. And I personally really liked it. More statistics. If you can answer statistical questions over the phone during an interview, that will blow anybody out of the water. These are great for free pictures. I put this in here because, like, I never know what to put in my PowerPoint presentations. If you don't know, PubMed is great for manuscripts, or your school library. And I think all of the Nevada schools right now, if you're an alumni, you still get access to all of these publications at the library. So keep your login, because I use this weekly at least. And then connections and networking, just like we're doing now. Yes, Andre, do you have another question?
Yes, Julia. Thank you very much. Absolutely interesting, useful advice. Well, and now let me please ask another question.
Okay.
What do you think is better, Python or R?
Oh, wait, say that again?
What do you think is better, Python or R?
Ooh, so I started with Python, and I really liked it because it was simple. But then I only went to R because it had more statistical packages at the time. But as of now, Python is superior to R.
Thank you.
So I would recommend Python. There are tons and tons of books for free on how to learn it, and they're really, really well written.
And do you write code, only by yourself, or edit code written by other people? Oh,
that's a great question. So for my job, I work with people who code in Python, SQL, R, Tableau you don't really code in. What else? SAS. So I've gotten really good at being able to convert whatever code I need to into R or SQL, because SQL is pretty easy. So I do recommend having at least a base of SQL knowledge.
Great.
Hey, Julie, I do have one question for you. When you, so say like it's your first job or whatever, and certainly you're going to learn a lot of skills, through programs at university or whatever on your own. How much are employers willing to kind of like train a, like you said, like super motivated person that shows, kind of those intangibles?
A great question. A company like Cigna, or I could even see, Blue Cross Blue Shield, probably USAA, they are willing. So as long as you're coming to the table with motivation and you're like, yes, these are the 3 things that I want to learn in the next year, with or without you as a company, they are always willing to support your training. We have full training classes where we can block off, half an afternoon or something to just work on stats refreshers if we need to. Most companies are very, very happy with people who want to continue learning, and they'll support that.
Awesome. Thanks.
Alejandra, do you have another question?
No, I think that that hand is there since then, maybe.
It's just there forever.
Sorry about
Okay,
that.
I just feel like you're waving at me.
Hey, Julia,
Yeah.
quick question.
Go ahead. Sure, go ahead.
Sorry. You can go first, Chris, no problem.
I was just going to add one more thing to your list of things a student could do now in school. And that is to apply for a summer internship if your advisor will allow you to. And what that does, in addition to allowing you to have a much richer conversation during your job interview, because you can talk about what you did during your internship, it also shows initiative, because a lot of the time you're not going to be advised to go away from school for a summer. So if you take the initiative to do that and apply and go off and do something for a summer, I think that also shows initiative, and it gives you actual real world project work to talk about and put on your resume.
Absolutely. That's a great thought there, Chris. And two, it gives you real world experience working with a company outside of academia. Academia is its own beast aside from the private sector. So being able to kind of, interweave yourself between both of those is a really great thing to do.
Yeah, and every year the ASA publishes a large list of available summer internships in AmStat News. I think it's the February issue, or it was a recent issue. I saw it recently.
Great. Shar, did you have a question?
May I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Oh, okay. May I introduce myself? I'm the Department Chair of Mathematics and Statistics at UNR. Thank you
Nice to
very
meet
much
you.
for your excellent presentation.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. Actually, Mihei and Chris have done a lot of work regarding that. Okay, my question is this. From a department chair points of view, I would like to know, in industry, if you recommend us to teach our student, what kind of statistical software you want us to use so that when they get to the industry, they will benefit the most. Now, you mentioned about Python, you mentioned about R before, and maybe I want this to be a little bit more specific. The lower level statistic classes, like freshman, sophomore, and then upper level, like a junior, things like that, or senior, and then graduate level, the master. I think, can you talk about these three levels? What kind of software you would recommend?
That's a really good question. So for the lower levels, I do feel like it's very good to have a very good understanding of Excel. It's not good for programming. It's not good for large statistics. It's good for basic statistics. But when someone sends you a really terrible, disgusting Excel file, you need to know how to clean it up and how to read it. And so for the lower levels, I do recommend Excel because it's something that is universal. It's something that people who don't know anything about data are going to use. And when you need to, oftentimes when I pull my data and clean it up, everybody asks for it in an Excel format. And so on the back end, that's typically what I send out is an Excel file with the data, which is both maddening, but I'm glad I learned Excel. And so that I feel like is a really good basis just for basic statistics.
Okay.
For kind of the middle levels, I really think Python is solid. So Python, you can start very basic. You can start with, just developing simple queries. You can also learn how very basic programming with Python, but you can also do very advanced analysis with Python now. We do a lot with Data Robot and a lot with, we just started this new analytics platform, and it's all Python based because it's the most universally accessible and it's free, And so that's,
I like to hear that.
we all do, right? Like it's hard keeping a pass license when it's so expensive every year for so many. And so, one of the things that we're really pushing is, if people can learn Python and SAS on their own without the SAS cost, right? Because that was my main limitation in my PhD program was I could have learned SAS, but I would have had to pay something for it or go down to campus to do it. I could learn R in the comfort of my own home on my weekends. And so, you know, having that ability and the initiative to do it on your own, I think makes a big impact.
Okay. How about the graduate level?
I really liked R, but I mean, with how advanced Python has gotten in the last few years, if I was starting my grad program now, I would have stayed with Python.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Great
it.
question.
Yeah, this, as a department chair, I ponder all the time, you know, and how to catch up with the industry, because we want to do a good service to our students so that when they join the workforce, they can have a relatively smooth transition.
Yeah, absolutely.
They get the right tool. I mean, that's important. Yeah. Yeah, I heard about Excel actually in the past. I helped some job training workshop several years ago, and some people from industry, insurance industry, told me that yeah, they use Excel a lot. I was a little bit surprised actually at that time, and now you just reinforce my yeah. Okay.
It's rough.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Julia, I have another question. Does Cigna accept international applications from international students?
Oh yes, yeah. Okay. I don't see why we wouldn't, because Cigna is not just a U.S. company. We actually have customers and hubs all over the world. So one of my coworkers was actually just down in Australia, getting a program set up there with a kind of co-sponsored insurance company.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excuse me, please, Julia.
A follow-up question about that, sorry.
Because probably the student meant that do you sponsor H-1B visas for international workers?
Yeah, exactly.
H-1B. Does Cigna sponsor H-1B visas for international workers?
I honestly don't know, but if you ping me about that on LinkedIn, I can look into it for you.
Thank you.
I'm happy to ask.
I would like to add along that line about the H-1B visa. Some companies do sponsor, some don't. University is better because usually university would sponsor H-1B visa.
Right.
But talking about private industry, I heard quite recently that the US government raised the salary threshold for private company to sponsor H-1B visa. I think the figure is much higher than before. So people are more difficult to get H-1B visa if they go to the industry. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I heard.
I was going to say, one of my coworkers, when COVID hit, he actually went back to New Zealand because he was a New Zealand resident. And there was a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of issues because he had been there for more than 6 months because he literally couldn't leave the country. And so Cigna kind of cut him off. But then after he worked with HR, everything was back up and running. And I know nothing about visas though, so I can't help you with this. But please, like I said, my LinkedIn stuff is there. So please feel free to ask me any questions, and I'll do what I can with HR and I'll just bombard them with questions. I'm happy to do that.
That's a good question.
Oh. Go ahead, Blessing.
Okay, thank you. So how let me be specific. So for Cigna, how do you guys buy statements like, okay, so I'm a student and I have I'll be working for say 3 years because I'll be using STEM OPT. I've heard of companies that would say that, oh, okay, we are sorry, we don't want to employ you for 3 years, and then afterwards you get to leave, even if you're not, you don't want the H-1B or you want to go back to your country. So how is Cigna, how does Cigna do it? Do you ask for, do you want to know if the person is willing to stay for a long term? Because someone can work for a company for just a year and leave. So how does it change if the person says I'm on OPT and I'll work for just 3 years, and companies will be like, well, yeah, sorry, we don't want to train you for 3 years and then you leave?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be pretty universal just across the industry, because when they're hiring at this level, they want to know that they're going to get their pound of flesh, basically, for lack of better words. It's good to be upfront with them about it, but I haven't worked with anybody who's been at the company for, I mean, I've only been there for 1.5 years, and everybody I've worked with has been there the whole time. So I'm not quite sure how to answer that question.
So this is Alejandra, and I have a question for Julia, but I also wanted to add something about, having that type of a visa and applying for employment. You probably don't want to hear this, but I read in a magazine that people in that situation that are hiring what are they called? The hunters, the
headhunters.
Job headhunting firm, and they pay them like $5,000. Are having a lot of luck with that, and because employers feel like that, they're concerned that you're not there for the long run. And I can relate to that because I train other people and I'm concerned about investing in them and if they will stay in the job for a while, because it takes a lot of time and energy to train people. You have to take time aside from your own work to train them, and then you struggle getting your own work done and that sort of thing. But I read that headhunting firms do that work for you, and it can save you a lot of time, and usually they can hook you up with a company that will try and help you get your visa. So, and that's probably not something that anybody wants to hear, but I read that people are having good luck with that. But what I was going to ask Julia is that, people are asking you what software you prefer and this and that. And I'm training in economics and in social science statistics, and I've had a lot of Stata training, and I was told that Stata was probably not going to be very popular, which I'm saying that almost in the long run, and I love it, because I'm used to it. And what do you recommend about that? It's like you learn something and then it kind of becomes obsolete, and how do you stay caught up with technology these days?
That's a great question. I work with a couple of people who have used Stata forever, and they like continuing to use it, but they're also adapting to, R or Python or SQL for their analytics needs. But that's a great question. I think that comes back to the motivation part of it, where we're in an industry that is continually not just rolling forward, but we are going forward at such a fast pace that it's hard to keep up sometimes. And I think that's something that, needs to be conveyed during an interview, or, even when you're at work, is that, I'm willing to adapt and evolve to whatever's happening. I never saw Python kind of overtaking some of the other analytics platforms just from where I stood as a grad student. But now being in the industry, I feel silly for learning R. Like I would have just stuck with Python. And so that's something that I think we all grapple with being in this field, is that where do you go? And a lot of times the company will help direct you. The company will say, we're going in, like right now we have the new analytics platform coming up. And so they're really pushing all of us towards Python and R. And I got lucky enough that just happened to be what I picked in grad school.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all for the wonderful questions.
Char, did you have a question?
Yeah. So I guess really great conversation here. Two things though. SAS does now have something called a university edition, which you can download for free. It's a limited version tool, and you can set that up on your computer. So that way you can learn SAS. Financial services, analytic professions are still very SAS heavy just because they've historically been regulated and used it. So I would also say if you have an interest in financial services, SaaS might not be a bad option to go down. Especially, you know, the older the financial fintechs are a different kind of case, but historical financial services companies are very heavy on SaaS still.
Is there a reason they're more SaaS heavy?
I think when they started developing models, R and Python didn't exist. So
Because I was wondering if it happened to do with like the security or something like that. But
also that, and the other thing is that SaaS does a really good job of providing APIs that work with R and Python. So there's something called SaaSPy that you could use.
Yep.
And then in ProcIML, there's this notion of using R, I think. So, and the other thing is they've historically been used for dashboarding, and they have these brilliant set of scientists there that make working with very large data sets a lot easier because they have these amazing paging algorithms that they do. So you could view your data sets, go back and forth, they get write to disk and all of that. So if you're working on a single box that's serving people, they do a phenomenal job of that. And so, and then, you know, unlearning to learn things is very difficult.
absolutely.
The point I want to make about Excel is if somebody comes to you and says, oh, I was expecting a large data set, but I only got 1,448,576 rows, they used Excel. And the reason is because it's 2 to the 20 max rows. So when you're working with very large data sets, please, in your emails, if you're working with non-technical people, tell them not to open their data in Excel. So I can't tell you how many times I've gotten that email. We've only got 1 million rows. It's like, well, because you use Excel. So the question really that I wanted to ask you is, so in the interviews that you did, the 3 interviews that you did, there's this sense of like learning from your previous interviews and you know, using what you believed didn't work for the next one. And everyone's got a different strategy. A lot of times people will extrapolate, oh, I didn't like this answer. But the thing is, they don't really have a target on how to achieve that. I was just wondering what you did to improve from interview to interview and what you learned over time, because there's no explicit rules here and nobody ever talks about it. So yeah, just curious how you manage that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first one was more molecular biology focused, so it didn't really count. But the second one that I interviewed for was for a pharma job. And it was very stats heavy, where it was, and my stats on the fly, I am a person that needs to write it down, look at it, analyze it, and then give you an answer. I do not like just throwing an answer out. That's just not who I am. And so when I was doing the pharma interview, it was, this is the data set we gave you. These were the results. What do you do? And it was, you know, I was trying to write down the results and they were like, no, we just told you what the results are. What do you do? And so what I started doing was then after that horrifying interview, I started doing some research on common questions for data analysts in X, Y, and Z fields. So in the pharma field, in healthcare, in banking, whatever, you know, insert X here. And so what I started to do was find these different forums that people had posted pretty much their whole interview on, of, you know, these were the questions I was asked, this is how I answered it. And so I started doing that, and then I was able to come to my final interview with Cigna with some really solid information of, you know, questions that I could ask them back that were very pointed, where, you know, they said, here's your data set, what do you do? And my questions were, well, what does the data look like? I would graph it and see what the data looks like before I proceed with any kind of statistical analysis, because if it's not normal, I'm not going to run a regression. And so that was what really helped me kind of develop my interview skills. Did that answer your question, Shar?
Yeah, no, that's really great. It's always fun to like, not fun, but like it's always interesting to talk to people and say, what did you learn from this? Like it's always the stuff that nobody talks about.
Yep.
That makes a key difference. One of the things that I've learned from my interview failures is I don't know if they're failures, they're just more experience, right? So if there's ever a question that I'm not able to answer or I feel like I did poorly, there's that you presented that what to ask people, right? I've often, I don't know, often, again, I'm exaggerating, but in a couple of instances, I have turned it around and said, you know, I don't know if I was satisfied with my answer. I don't know how you don't have to give me specific feedback on mine, but how would you approach this problem? And so also treat your interview as a learning experience in that self. And so admit that, you know, in this moment, I couldn't come up with the most ideal answer. It didn't even maybe satisfy me. And if you think that the other person is receptive on the other end, maybe ask them how it worked out. And so take those learnings as well. So just another tip. So, you know, learning from the interviews and definitely I'd say like updating your language also helped for me. So, you know, don't call it hypothesis testing, call it A/B testing, and then don't call it a treatment, call it an exposure instead. So things like that help when you're communicating with people. And so.
Absolutely. And back to your point, Shar, of like asking them what they would have done, that gives you really good insight to not only that company, but that person that may have been your manager. So if they say, no, I don't have time to explain this to you, I mean, that's not great. Whereas when I asked that during my interview, it was, oh, okay, well, we would have approached it like this and done this and pulled these ideas in and done this. Of course, I was coming to the health insurance field knowing nothing. But you really want to be in a supportive community. And, you know, that kind of gives you an idea too of what you'd be walking into.
That's exactly right. And I think it speaks a little bit to that motivation aspect that you were hitting too, that you're willing to go in there and not just say, I know there's like 12 things and that's my world. You're saying, well, I'm willing to add a few more from the commentary that you're providing me. So that I think just you come off as a more holistic person in that sense as well.
Yeah, great point, Shar.
So Julia, let me add to what you and Shar were saying. I came from the pharmaceutical industry, and it's still the case that SaaS is very dominant. There are many reasons for that, but it is one of the largest employers, private sector employers of statisticians. In my day, it was the largest private sector employer of statisticians. And if you don't come in with a pretty proficient SaaS skills, almost all the doors are going to be closed to you. But we did hire a lot of OPT people. We sponsored H-1Bs back, this is like 10 to 20 years ago when I was there. And so there was absolutely no problem bringing in international students as employees. In fact, the majority of them were. So just to comment there. Are there any other questions? We're like 25 minutes over time, so a very
sorry about that
conversation. Anyone else?
Okay, so I have a question.
Go ahead.
So do you, so there is a language which has the same name as you, Julia.
Yes.
And right now some people are interested in this and saying that it is faster than Python or R. So what do you think about this? And is it important or useful?
Great question. I only thought about using it because it was named after me, but that I never actually looked into it because during the PhD program, I was so bogged down with just R and getting really, really good at that I never really pursued Julia to see, you know, how much more powerful that was. At this point, we're not using it. I don't know, Shar, if anybody in your institution is using it, but I mean, it's always something good to pursue just in case, if you're interested, especially.
Thank you.
I think especially in the tech industry, there's a movement to adopt Julia. And the reason is because I think it provides certain kind of production and development functionality that Python ends up being a little bit slow at. So when you've got these like very large model files that need to get put into production or massive training that needs to be done, I think people are starting to prefer Julia. But at the same time, I have not seen any organization ever saying that you definitely need to have experience in Julia to get a job. I think typically they will allow you to come in with, say, like Python experience and test you on that and invest in you to learn specific tools. I think Python has become the de facto standard over time just because the number of people using it is very large. So until that happens, which maybe happens 10 years from now, maybe happens never. We'll never know. But until that happens, I don't think that for job seekers, that's going to be a huge deal.
So Dr. Tam, you might want to, there may be two different fields here. You may have like healthcare analytics and Char's field in the financial institution, where which one do you want to go with? And you may have, Python and R on one end and SAS on the other. That's tough.
Yeah, I think you're right. I have some friends in health industry, and they told me that the PD standard, if you're doing very serious statistical analysis, it's SAS, because it's, the government require that, and funding agency, that kind of thing. Not necessarily everybody, but looks like, but SAS is pretty expensive.
And I honestly can't tell you why they're pushing us towards Python and R, but I'm thankful they are, because I'm really good at R, so I'll take it.
Yeah, I heard a lot of good things about R and Python. Yeah.
I like to add.
And excuse me, we have a person who recently graduated with a master's in stats, and she said that almost everybody's going with R because it's free, Yeah. Employers are realizing a lot of cost savings, and it's very robust and so forth.
Anybody heard about people in the industry using something like Minitab? No?
In the engineering type fields, sometimes JMP and Minitab will crop up. But I think we're going to have to wrap this up pretty soon.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to get a student to have the last question, please.
Okay, I think I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, which is more important? Is it the programming language or the domain language of the company that you're going to work with during your interview prep? Because but now data science in 2020 is different from data science in 2021, and different companies tend to look for specific things when hiring interns or even entry-level positions. So
yeah, no, that's a really good question, because then you have to weigh, right, what am I going to learn versus what is the company that I want to work for want me to learn. And back to the motivation thing, if you come to them saying I have a base knowledge of a language, most languages now, I think SAS is the most complicated one I've ever had to decipher, but coming to the table with don't be afraid, I guess is what I should say, to apply for a job. And when you write your cover letter, tell them I'm really good at this language. I see that you want people to know this language. I'm willing to learn this language in the next 6 months if you hire me. That's kind of the best of both worlds. You're showing them that you have a basis, motivated to you're willing to learn more, and that you really want to work with them, and that's why you're willing and motivated to learn language.
Okay, thank you. I'm good.
Great questions, everybody. Thank you so much. Ooh.
So thank you, everybody. We've kind of lost a lot of our viewers already, but Julia, thank you so much for presenting to us. The fact that we ran half an hour over proves that your talk was extremely successful and a great start to our series. And maybe we will have to bring you back at some point. So thank you, Julia. Thank you to everyone who attended. And we'll make this recording available soon thereafter, and see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Have a great night, everybody.
Have a nice evening.
Bye.
Bye.